it's such a nice shape that I'm going to be struggling with it a lot. So now I was kind of done with the base, sort of like first color sketch. I decided to turn down the super cheesy, heavy-handed light and try to, as a challenge, because like I said, I was based on the previous sort of like sci-fi fantasy night that I did before. But in this case, I wanted to raise up the stakes. I don't know if I say this. Is that I'm talking about a piece of meat or like an objective? Um, Pronunciation fail. So I was like, can I do it without this super cheesy trick? And it would require much more subtlety in the rendering, but I think in the end it would be quite interesting, and it will just also showcase the local material better, in the fact that I wanted to use all those sort of like really nice Japanese armor stuff. And when I looked at the reference, they don't have any cheesy light, and they still look amazing. So I was like, let's try to replicate that. So what I'm always gonna try, same way as I was saying before, is like focus on the big piece first and use it as like a base for all the quality of your of the rest of your render. So in this case, I think the main piece is and they're close to each other, but the shoulder piece and the cat's head. By the way, in this case, I'm really not an expert in like armor design, and now that I look at it, I mean it's a ridiculously oversized shoulder pad, and I don't care. I just that's just what I wanted to do, because I just wanted to enjoy the painting this big sort of bird's armor piece, bird head armor piece. Um, and so I decided to oversize the shoulder pad. It's totally unfunctional. I totally admit that, but I don't care at this point. I just want something that looks cool. Um, so you can see that the one of the biggest challenge when you start rendering is to sort of again come up with shapes that not only look good but also make sense. Because and you want like to break down surfaces in unusual ways, to be an interesting design and to be an interesting shape to look at under this light. I don't know if that makes sense. It's a bit hard to understand again, because I'm really not an expert at this, and so you'll see me try and fail a lot. But it's kind of how I perceive it, and also because like again I became wiser along the way, like I was saying. But I started by trying to do this whole shoulder pad in one material first, which was of like sort of metal bone, so like looking like bone but being made of metal sort of way. Um, and I think my mistake at this point was that to not I fell in love too much with the first sort of big render shapes that I did, like this big cheek and eye socket shape and the beak, and I end up like sort of like not breaking those form enough and doing too many small shapes, as you will see later. Um, and uh, and uh, and it's just not as interesting as it could be. But I was getting acquainted with that, like so it's okay to fail, it's okay to try it. See, like I'm doing things that are, I think, way too subtle and not that interesting. It's sort of like you know this feeling when you're kind of scared of breaking your own design, and you're getting attached to your first ideas too much, like the thing that I warned you to be wary of at the beginning. Well, that's exactly what I'm doing. It's like um, I forget myself, or I'm starting to enjoy the the, the, the the small shapes too much, instead of thinking about the bigger picture here, literally. Um, so yeah, see, I'm just doing too many little things too soon, uh, because I'm lying to myself, telling myself that this is the big shapes are good enough. it's very tricky. It's very tricky. But as long as you stay open, and then I think I slept on it and came back the day after, and then realized that there's just like something that wasn't as good as it could be. See, I'm just like falling in love with rendering that material because I just want to get there too quick, too fast. I just want to get to the little crunchy things, the little nuggets of candies at the end of the render, which are all the little details and highlights, which makes those materials really nice. But it's way too soon to do that, and so I get lost in it. And then I struggle with that the idea of the horns coming out of the eye sockets for a very long time. Um, at this point, I just didn't want it to touch the silhouette, which is also a mistake. Like I said before, you should. Yes, it was satisfying at a time when it was a flat shape, but then when you start putting render in it, it might just not work anymore. So not work in a way that on a layer of believability of functionality of design or of just like those volumes together. They were making sense as a flat silhouette, but they don't make sense as rendered objects anymore. It just look weird. And so again, you have to make your peace with that and being able to part from it, which takes a while in this case. And I didn't at this point, because I showed you the reference before, which is full of Japanese armor. But at this point in my reference, I didn't have them. I just had bird skulls and stuff like that. So I wasn't really set on going the full Japanese samurai sort of flavor. So that's why I'm sticking to this kind of stone metal kind of material at this point. And I'm struggling with shapes. I feel like see, I'm trying to make sense of it in terms of volume in 3D, not just shapes also, which is another layer of complexity that you have to think about when you start rendering. It still, at this point, it still makes sense as a volume, but it's just not interesting enough. And again, it just takes doing, it just takes spending time on it and trying and failing and trying and failing. And your brain is gonna, at some point, just click into, okay, I got that. Now let's try this. Sort of, sort of process. I don't know. And now, like, I'm like, this is what keeps me from moving past this. This is the little blue on the cat's face. Ah, that's why. So I went and removed that. It was just bothering me. Just so yeah. I mean, it's like extremely hard, but it's like one of the most fun part for me. Is like it's such a pain in the ass to go through this, but at the same time, I love it. I love rendering form and getting getting into a believable result that also look pleasing enough to me that I can continue and feel like this is on the right path. Also, color-wise, you see that like I was saying before, the sort of warmer shadows are starting to pop out, and because as you can see, all the light area is sort of getting into the colder spectrum, and that's what I was talking about before. Because my local color, because I set up the environment as being a sort of warmer. So now I can use a colder light, and it just makes it look nice. So you can start seeing the idea emerge of layering and breaking down in much bigger pieces. What I always forget is that it seems that for interesting design you have to, the same as like, so it goes back to etching actually. When you're etching shapes, form in pencil, is like you try to go across the form to break it up, so it's not so logic and expected in a way. I don't know if that's a good explanation, but that's all I kind of start understanding it. And sometimes when you, I find that it to be quite successful. Is like when you something is not working, just try to again like erase, destroy, and go back to bold moves, big shapes, and you might not you might not keep them in the end, but it just gives you a fresh perspective, or it's just big shapes sort of gives you a new something to compare your previous design to, and you might go back to your design thinking, oh no, it's the right way, but you might also find that oh, actually this is what's wrong with it. It's missing the bottom layer is just not good enough. And I think that's when I started looking at the Japanese masks and the helmets where they have like much stronger interconnected forms. I hate that eye socket. I was I was so mad about this because I so wanted to keep that idea for some reason. Stupid idea of the horn coming out of the eye socket, but I just wasn't good enough. Failed. I failed myself, mom. Um, and so yeah, so that's you see that's when I start modifying the original silhouette just to make something that looks more logical. And again, you just saw that I compared back with what I had, and I found that it was better before. So I just erase, destroy it, restart. It doesn't take that long once you. The sooner you do it, the better it is, and it doesn't take that long to repaint something. It's like, and sometimes you have also happy accidents because when you erase, suddenly uh, something shows up that you weren't expecting, and it looks better suddenly. It's like, oh wait, what was that? And then you look at it, and you're like, oh, that's cool. I'm gonna try going that route. It's annoying as fuck because you can never plan it, but it tends to happen. So now you see that's what I was telling by like making form change more because in terms of like creating dark and light shapes, like it's more justified. But for example, at the bottom you have this I don't know how to call it, but the recurving part at the bottom because it's not facing light anymore, doesn't receive is much darker, and the part just the junction between the two form transition receive the highest light, so you have this really nice light what I'm painting right now, and because it's curved also you see you have like a very nice transition on the reflective part on the highlight and a very high threshold of going from dark to light. And that just creates, that's what I was saying before, is like that just creates interesting value arrangements. Value arrangements is just like everything. It's the thing you're looking for at all times. Interesting value arrangements. That also makes sense. So that's why I mean I don't have any particular subject matter that I prefer. I just enjoy painting, and so any subject matter can be subjected to any subject matter can be subjected. It can be subjected to this kind of research of like within that field, what kind of value arrangement, what kind of interesting value arrangement can I think about? If I light it this way or light it that way, or if I turn the shapes this way or that way, if I design the shape this way. I mean, there's an infinite amount of possibilities there, not in terms just of pure design, but then on like on the rendering level, there's an infinity also of combination. Um, and that's for me is like the most interesting part of the job. It's very, very personal again, but I found that this, because this is part, like 90% of the work is that it's like the back to the craft thing. I mean, once you the creative part, the artist part is like the beginning, when you just concept, find shapes and stuff like that, or find a main idea and stuff like that. But that doesn't last very long. Most of it is really the craft of like being able to consistently render something and make it look good to a final product. For me, anyway, it's like it's what I spend most time doing. So you have to find a way to enjoy that, otherwise it's hell. So and somehow I did, because I just enjoy, like, there's still magic into rendering things by hand. Um, People who prefer the creative part then will switch to 3D and let the 3D engine do everything for them, and only focus on the what they consider to be the interesting part. But I just love doing that. For me, it's like seeing somebody do a great line sketch. I just There's a magic to it that is still alive after all those years. And also the more you practice, the better you get at it, and so the more kick you get out of it, because you spend less time, and you suffer less for a better result. So it's just kind of motivate you to, and you find more pleasure in it, I guess, um, in a masochistic sort of way. So here again, like you see me just trying to find interesting cross form that combine well with that design, and just trying to bring out volumes that are, because the basic volume is a half sphere, right? The shoulder pad is a half sphere. So based on that half sphere, what other kind of volumes can you add across, or add through, or add within, or coming out of it, that make that simple half sphere more or less boring thing, It's just and combined with like variation in textures and variation in materials and how lights bounce on it and stuff like that. How does that uh, what do you have to say about that? It's kind of like that. What do you have to say with what do you want to do? What do you have to say about this subject matter? Is the whole point of this research? Because like I don't know if I would be, and that's why I have a hard time repeating the same thing or redoing the same sort of assignment. Is like, because the interesting part is the research part, is like the figuring out stuff along the way. But if you know already from the start that you're going to do exactly the same thing from beginning to end, and you already solved this problem 100 times, then I don't see what's the point. It's just not so interesting to me anymore. And it's like directly proportional with how much willpower I'm willing to apply to that in order to solve it. But that's like subjective. I mean, so now we're really getting into more of a sort of Japanese sort of demon-looking bird auk sort of thing, which is starting to take shape, and it's sort of like starting to dictate. Um, it actually, at this point, when you start having like, okay, I kind of found what I wanted to do with this. It just becomes a lot easier, because it starts to dictate, and all your decision making is much easier, because then you just have to compare it to that element, and if it fits with that, then it gets a go. If it doesn't fit, then you remove it. So at the point where I made the decision of going with the sort of like Japanese vibe, then it becomes a bit easier to find shapes and stuff like that, because you can check with your rational brain this time instead of your gut feeling, and get a confirmation that you're on the right path. so then it's like right now I'm just going back and forth and trying to bring everything together and introduce the bounce light from the cat's fur actually. And once I kind of make the decision of like, okay, I was kind of happy with those shapes, and now you can start getting into refining edges and adding new volumes that will bring new interesting sort of value informations. And try to make them play off each other, like the area I was working just now with the bounce light from the cat's fur, and then the big highlights coming from the front light. Well, you can try to find a balance of like where one stops and one begins, and just try to, like I was saying before, introduce as many variations of like light on dark, dark on light, gray on gray, gray on black, gray on white, all these different value situation. The windmill effect, like James Gurney puts it, one of the greatest art principle that I've ever. I'm making fun of it, but the windmill principle. But it's so important. It's so true. Go check on his blog. You can see that. It just makes everything more interesting when your optics is always turned towards trying to find any situation where you can apply that principle of like mixing value composition together to create the most impactful and varied value composition. Value composition. I'm repeating myself a lot. Sorry about that. So it's so funny how like you can spend so much time looking at, for example, here the one area which was the eye socket, the beak, and the bottom part that you actually never ever noticed that the top part was totally left unkept and doesn't actually work at all with anything else. And then suddenly you're like, oh, I remember that part. And it's just like you suddenly see it again for the first time for some reason. Trying to propagate the same material. So again, it's just the same thing over and over again. Like, honest assessment of every single area is like, how can it be better? Can it be better first? Can it be better? Is it the best that I can do? If I can, what should I do? Look at reference, look at your own design, compare with other areas, and what can you do? What can you do? What can be better? Honestly, like because you could stop at any times and be happy with yourself, I guess. But the only way to push something further and further and further is like to never really let it go and never be satisfied about it, I guess. It helps to have like, that's why reference also is so important, because it gives you a roadmap of like, this is kind of like, until I've reached at least that feeling that I feel from that great reference that I collected. Because when I'm saying great, it's just a personal opinion, but you find this reference, you like, you think it's great for some reason, and then you're like, okay, until I've reached something equal or better, then at least that is not good. It's not good enough, and I can't stop. It's a good way to think about it, I guess. Now there's a we like the top part is really tricky because I was struggling with it, because you want to expand it because the rest of the design calls for it, but you have a massive conflict with having the cat's face next to it. So I was struggling with that edge. At the same time, it creates another very super interesting contrast between light and shadow shapes, or light and dark shapes. and it ends up bringing the focus exactly where you want it to be, while at the same time being a really unusual setup.